don't bet this, bet that is a good approach to futures where you go, oh, I want to take the Lions to win the Super Bowl. Great. Okay. Well, we've just shown you on the show that they have the largest handle and they're the favorite of the public to win. There's how many teams are in the NFL, Shane? 32 teams?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we guessing, or is that I don't even know.
There's 32 teams.
Okay. There's 32. Okay. We're not guessing. We actually know there's 32 teams. Right?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Lines, the only podcast purifying the sports betting industry. Like, download, subscribe, follow us on all the socials at In Play Live. I'm your host, Shane Mercer. That guy over there, Andrew Pace, the founder of In Play Live, a community of like-minded sports bettors dedicated to long-term success. And on today's show, football, and more football. It's that time of year. And Pace, I don't know about you, but I'm absolutely jacked for it. But I want to start this whole conversation off on football talking about what I think many other people out there are living right now, which is fantasy football drafts. So I've got two fantasy football drafts tonight, Pace. One with the In Play Live league, another with a league that I've been in. I think this is going to be our 14th season. And that league is also my highest buy-in league. It's also the league that has the most rivalry. It's the one that I care the least about the prizes and the money and the most about just winning and bragging rights. But, you know, Pace, I was thinking about this coming into it, and I've got those two leagues tonight. I've already done two previous drafts. I've got another one tomorrow. And I'm thinking about it all going like, man, fantasy football is fun, but it is long-term, like, negative EV in a major way. You know, when you think about it in terms of the amount of time invested versus the amount that you'll probably win if you do win, it's pretty negative EV, but very, very positive EV from the sense of building relationships, friendships, perhaps negative EV on friendships at points along the way, but but just a whole lot of fun. So you know, I wanted to kick things off because I know a lot of people, a lot of our audience, a lot of listeners, members out there are just living and breathing their fantasy drafts at the moment. So wanted to start the conversation there. Pace, how do you feel about fantasy football?
Hugely positive EV.
Okay.
Fantasy football. And I'm not kidding. There's a big reason for it. And it's actually the single reason that Leroy at our In Play Live event brought up his sort of involvement to a level that makes him successful as a bettor with baseball.
Oh, I do remember him mentioning this. Yeah.
So let's take professional sports betting out of the equation. Fantasy football is America's biggest expenditure, the greatest source of time theft from companies.
Yeah.
Above all other things. This is not a joke. This is a fact.
Yeah.
It's a multi-$100 billion expenditure to corporate America. Pretty crazy. So if you are a fantasy football player, you know, you're drafting, you're with your buddies, you're making a big deal about it, you're managing your team, you know, you see your screen time report at the end of the week, multi-hour event, following in your games, you know, a lot of entertainment, a lot of fun. You could say it's plus EV from that standpoint. But if you're, you know, it's taken away from your career, it's taken away from your family, your relationships, et cetera, you could ask yourself, you know, what's the point? Like, is it fun? Yes. Is entertainment important? Yes. Is that something that you should budget time for? Absolutely. When it crosses over a certain threshold, you have to ask yourself why, because to your point, you're saying it's negative EV. You do the math of your time and what the potential prize is. It's just a fucking joke. Like, It's a fucking joke. Now, with that out of the way, fantasy football is the gateway to professional sports betting. And I don't mean sports betting. I mean professional sports betting. I'm sure it's a gateway to all the square bettors out there too.
Yeah, big time.
But you are starting to get into the game and know the players and the analytics and the data and who's on field, when, why, how, and where. You start to identify patterns. Fantasy football is so plus EV because it keeps you in tune with the personnel on the field, and is just so valuable to me. I'm a terrible fantasy football player. Actually, I always make that joke about myself, but I'm a 2-time redraft champion in my old company's office league. I'm back-to-back champ here, and I'm looking to three-peat this year. But I play in like what you referenced there, Shane, your important league, your league with your buddies, and the highest buy-in league and all that kind of stuff. We do a 5-keeper league. And I can't even, like, 8 teams make the playoffs. I can't even make the playoffs. Like I'm fucking terrible, right? But I'm getting reports on Sleeper about players. I'm getting them while I'm betting.
Yeah.
Oh, he's out of the game. I didn't know that it wasn't even reported yet, and I got it from Sleeper quicker than I got it from watching the game.
As a news service, Sleeper is top notch. It's unbelievable how good they are in terms of delivering news in a fast and efficient way. Anyway, just wanted to make that point.
But I mean, that's kind of the whole point, is like fantasy helps you stay in tune with the sports that you wager on. And as a pro bettor, it's a tool in my toolkit. Now, it actually works both ways too, because one of the things that the recreational fantasy player will do is they'll be in front of the screen, they'll see a player like Saquon Barkley go down and get injured, and they're immediately going to the waiver wire to get a claim in for Tuesday on Sunday.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a fantasy football player and I'm describing you right now, do you know there's a way to make money from that same moment, where instead of going to the waiver wire, you're going into the sports books and finding value on the next player up in some capacity, finding value on the line based on a certain player no longer being in the game, finding value on a touchdown scorer based on a potentially bench guy coming in for a starter and going to get a whole bunch more reps. There's a window of time. It's usually a very short window of time where you can capitalize on these things. So it actually works both ways, where you go, okay, I'm going to the waiver wire right now. I know who I'm going to pick up off the waiver wire, not based on some report that someone told me to pick up each week. I know based on what I just watched.
Yeah.
But the flip side is, instead of going to the waiver wire first, I'm going to a sports book and potentially making a plus EV bet based on what I'm seeing on the field. So yeah, fantasy football keeps you in tune with what's going on the field, and I think it is so plus EV. I think it's a massive tool for professional sports bettors. And if you're a member of In Play Live and you're not in a fantasy league, I know this is airing the day before the NFL starts. Join one just for this purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, you might have swung me back here as I was sort of juggling all these leagues. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, why am I in all these leagues? What am I doing with, this is too much, because I am, actively betting on this already. And I'm already devoting so much of my time to this, but it was like, do I really need these other fantasy leagues around me as kind of like pre-game distractions, and things I got to get done before I actually get to work on the live betting. But you might have sort of pulled me back in here as a reason to kind of keep them going.
Shane, what did you used to call yourself as a bettor when we first started Behind the Lines? You'd be like, he's a professional bettor and I'm this. What would you say?
Oh, I think I said something along the lines of, I'm a recreational sports betting enthusiast or something like that.
You made up some weird term, kind of like how I came up with the term sports value analyst.
Right.
You came up with some term for yourself. Well,
Yeah.
I noticed you stopped calling yourself that a while ago. And I don't mean a little while ago. It just stopped. And the reason why it stopped is because you don't view yourself that way.
No, I don't think I do anymore. No, absolutely not. And I very much view myself as a professional sports bettor. I approach
a sports value analyst.
A sports value analyst.
Thank you.
I whatever you want to call me. I really very much approach this as a business, and there's an income source behind it that is sort of the proof that's in the pudding, so to speak. That legitimizes that business.
Okay, so I fucking hate having multiple fantasy leagues. 2 for me is great. One this important one, and the other one the redraft. Very different. You get new players every year, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But when you go above 2, the reason why I didn't like it was because I found myself cheering against my teams.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how the puzzle fits here. And there's memes about this on social media where, husband sits down with wife for Sunday Night Football, and he's like, he's wearing a Dallas Cowboys jersey. He's a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, and he goes, we need them to win, but I have the other team's defense, so I need them to barely win. And then something good happens that is in line with what he says, and he puts his hands in his head, and she's like, why is this bad? And he's like, oh, I'm against him in my other league. And it's like, you're cheering for weird shit, right?
Yeah.
So I hate that element of it. And again, that's like the recreational sort of mindset with it all. But if you're in 10 leagues, which is a lot, right? Probably not a lot of people in 10 leagues. But if you're in 10 leagues, you're going to pretty much have the rosters to cover off all of the important players in any given league. And what that does for you when you're managing it all, maybe you're not super social in all those 10 leagues, but you're so in tune with everything that's going on. You know the injuries, you know the personnel, you know who's coming in next, you know the waiver wire, and who, you know, it might be someone that you missed out on the waiver wire. You're like, I really wanted to get him. You see him next week, he's going off. But then you transition that again to those sports books, and you go, hey, I'm Shane. I'm not this recreational betting enthusiast anymore. I'm a pro bettor. I'm questioning my fantasy football. Whereas I would turn it around and say, well, you're actually accessing data in a productive and almost gamified way, as opposed to just going and looking at it all. It's just a part of your leagues.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of the day to day, and it becomes so engrossed in your day to day. You know, I think a part of it now too is like, you know, like I mentioned, I've got, you know, one that's really sort of important, you know, and then maybe another that'll be trying in, and then some of them are really just, you know, conversation pieces when the next time I meet that group of people. You know what I mean? Whether it's former coworkers or whether it's family or whoever it might be, right? It's sort of just like, oh yeah, how am I doing in that league again? Right? Like, or what players do we have? And you know, just a point of conversation, which I guess is huge positive EV when you look at it from that sense of things, right? And sort of just building those relationships and keeping those connections. But yeah, anyway, everybody out there listening, I wish everybody best of luck in their fantasy seasons ahead. It is sure to be filled with lots of ups and downs and all sorts of injuries and high moments, and I'm sure some low points as well. Pace, another big thing that people out there are doing and gearing up for, and this is a bit of a plug for an episode that we recorded and released 2 weeks ago on survivors. There's a lot of survivor pools out there. Survivor pools have grown in popularity, I would say, big time over the last, say, 5 years or so. You know, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, not hearing about it too much, you know, maybe the odd one here and there. But now it's like, hey, I'm getting messages, again, from all of my different fantasy leagues. There's all these people in those leagues that all want to send me a message. Hey, you want to join my survivor pool? You know, and it's like, I think I've got enough going on. You know, I don't think, you know, your survivor pool sounds like fun, but the $25 buy-in maybe isn't quite worth it for me. You know,
it's not moving the needle.
Not moving the needle. Not quite moving the needle, but they're hugely popular and people out there are getting involved with them and that kind of thing. So if anybody's interested in Survivor, go back and head to that episode that we did a couple of weeks ago. Very fantastic guest we had on there talking all things Survivor. But Pace, any thoughts on Survivor and whether that helps you get plugged in?
So yeah, I think just one point I want to bring up there is Survivor is such a big industry now that entire businesses are based on it. We touched on that in that Survivor episode. Mm-hmm. But separately of that, I don't know how much we talked about different ways to enter circa Survivor from not being in Las Vegas. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because circa Survivor is VIG free. The entire pot goes back to the winning player or players, right? Yet there's like an entire industry built around this no VIG pool that exists. And what I'm getting at there is people are charging $150, $250, $350, even $400+ for you to get your entry in and for you to have a proxy getting your picks in so that you can be a part of Survivor. So Circa isn't charging a VIG, but businesses have been entirely created that are multi-100,000, potentially multi-million-dollar businesses. Because if you're getting, you know, $12, $14 million pots at Circa, and you go, okay, let's take 25% of that pool, 50% of that pool, 75% of that pool, and people are providing services so that you can enter Circa Survivor from New York or anywhere else in the world, they're charging the VIG. and making big money off of it, which shows you people's willingness to try to, get rich quick, buy this big lottery ticket, because it's probably the most realistic lottery ticket that exists, is hitting this Circa Survivor. But it's also an expensive one. It's $1,000 ticket.
Yeah.
But you talk about the popularity of Survivor. Well, there you go. Entire businesses have been built on just getting you into a pool, which is just
that's
nuts.
Unreal to think about. That you could build a whole business around one Survivor pool. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
One single Survivor pool with a very high entry fee, as you mentioned, $1,000. And I guess if you go and you use one of these other services, they're going to charge you something on top of that $1,000.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening to this before Friday, September 7th, Friday, September 8th, whatever it is, you can still join the In-Play Live Survivor Pool, which is also VIG free. And we do have to pay a hosting fee to the site, but that's it. So it is a VIG free, and the PayPal. Don't get me started on PayPal.
I still have to send you. I still have to pay you for it too.
There you go. But there's been some VIG in the PayPal sending process. But nonetheless, you can still join if it's before that date. So, anyways, is there an edge or angle there? Absolutely not. Is there an edge or angle from what we did 2 weeks ago? That's the edge or angle. Is it helping you with your betting? No. We saw it on stream last year. I'm going to call him out. We witnessed one of our pros derail mentally on a stream because he got bounced from Survivor. And we witnessed him completely abandon his betting because of his Survivor pool.
Oh,
right. So one of the biggest,
I forget this moment. I'm trying to remember who it is.
One of the biggest mistakes of any recreational bettor, I'm not referencing a recreational bettor, or any sports bettor, is being tied to their fantasy team as it relates to betting, is being tied to a pregame bet as it's relating to their live wagers, is being tied to anything emotionally like fanship or any of these other things I'm describing, that is causing you to not see value in real time. And one of the things I found myself doing on Saturday, I'm referencing college football right now, is I went, why am I looking at this side still? Look at the other side, Andrew. And sometimes what that lets you do is not bet the game at all or see the game differently. So I find myself swayed towards this one team. Well, what if I just completely erase that from my mind and start it over? And sometimes those biases are so deeply rooted and built inside of us. A good example of that was I found myself wanting to bet on the Huskies on Saturday. And I remember watching the game and going, should I have this bias right now? This is a bias based on a different coaching staff, a different quarterback. The list goes on and on. And I'm like, just let that go. Look at the other side. And that caused me more or less to not continue to bet on the Huskies in that game. There are a couple Huskies bets on our tracker there, but yeah, drop your bias, and your bias comes in so many forms. Survivor creates massive bias. It is extremely dangerous for your live betting. And for everyone at In-Play Live, and you're like, oh, Pace, why are you running a Survivor pool? Well, I won the Survivor pool last year. But let go of that bias. And the way that makes things easy to do that, like the number one thing I would say is, let's say you do have a Survivor pool with a lot riding on it. And you're like, okay, I'm so focused on this team losing or this team winning or whatever. And you're following that in. Well, if it doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go, that means you missed out on the value of that other team in real time. Whereas if it goes the way that you want it to go, maybe you didn't even lose live because right? So like if you go, oh, I don't want that to happen because of Survivor. But if you take that out and go, this is what's currently happening, I'm going to capitalize right now. Maybe it's a half line. Maybe it's a game line. Maybe it's a total. Who knows? Where you eliminate that bias, you may have won twice. And separately of that, you didn't let some sort of lottery ticket influence you.
Great. That's a great point. And, you could very easily in that situation win back your Survivor entry fee, and just get it all back and boom, not worry about it anymore.
Or the whole pot.
or the whole pot. I mean, geez, that's I'm just saying
the thing. People, Shane, people. So our survivor pool, I think, was like 24,000 last year, and it's going to be way more this year. It's booming.
All right,
it's
all
booming.
right. Well, I got to get in. All right.
So if you are a sharp sports bettor, those prize pools, circa is an anomaly. Those prize pools oftentimes they move the needle from this lottery ticket mentality. But if you are really sharp, you're not going to get your buy-in back by dropping your bias. You're going to make way more than the pool's payout, right? Like I made more on Saturday than the pool paid out last year, right? So those are the things that you have to recognize. We talk about compound interest. We talked about this last time, the eighth wonder of the world, right? So maybe you're like, oh, but that's not me pace. Well, I had a cancellation email from a dude who's super into In Play Live last week. He's like, my bankroll's only $700. I can't make it pay for the subscription. I'm like, oh man, and that's where you're ignoring compound interest, right? You're ignoring the ability for it to grow. So stay disciplined, keep making those sharp, smart decisions. And even if that survivor or fantasy or whatever it is, that pool moves the needle for you beyond, what your current betting level is, your current betting level will be way better off long term if those biases don't affect you.
Yeah. And I think the longer you stay in a survivor, the longer you survive, the more likely you are to be influenced by it and have that bias, right? Because now you're getting deeper and it's starting to feel real that you're there. So, just be warned when you enter survivor, if you are somebody out there who's trying to, be successful as a, sports value analyst. If you're just trying to have fun in survivor, well, that's one thing, but you want to be successful as a sports value analyst, have fun with survivor and just keep it as something for fun. And don't let it influence those live decisions. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty of this year's NFL season and what we're actually going to see out there come Thursday night. Wow, we've got the Chiefs and the Ravens. What a great game to kick things off. Very excited to see the reigning champs come back out. And why don't we start there? Because one of the big storylines pace out there in the betting world is the Chiefs to three-peat. First chance to do it since the Patriots did it in 2005. So that would take us into 2025. So we're talking 20 years later. And I think the current odds have the Chiefs as the favorites to win it all at plus 500 or 6.0. Just to give it a little bit of perspective there. So that's the Chiefs in the top spot. We've got the 49ers behind them at plus 600, the Ravens at plus 1,000, and the Lions at plus 1,200 to win it all. Interesting thing here on the Lions, they're actually receiving 9% of bets and 12% of the handle. So sort of punching above their weight in that sense. Very quickly, what do you think about this sort of picture?
Shane, you are talking to the wrong guy.
I figured as much.
We got this shit, man. Yeah, I love it, but I hate it. Like a guy at my pool. I went to my pool on Sunday before the USC. What was it? USC LSU game, and it just so happened that the cast of School Spirits was at the hot tub. Never heard of the show before, but the main girl, Peyton something, she was in the hot tub, super nice chatting us up, or vice versa. I mean, let's be real. But a guy heard our conversation, comes over, he recognized me, and he goes, "Hey, man, you're the betting guy. Who's your team? Who do you have to win the Super Bowl?" He's all excited, thinking I was going to give him the winner. Like, I don't fucking know. Right? Like, talking about the Chiefs and the three-peat. The Patriots didn't three-peat. They went 3 of 4.
Right.
So the three-peat is
good
like,
point.
I know nothing about this stuff. I don't even know if it's happened before. I'm sure at some point the Dallas Cowboys did it, but I have no fucking clue if it's happened before.
That was the time before that. Yeah.
So, can the Chiefs do it? Absolutely. Is it going to be harder and harder, having the target on your back? Sure. I think the Chiefs are poised to be as good as they've ever been. The Lions getting a lot of hype. That makes so much sense to me. There should be hype around that team. They were fucking amazing last year. And they're young and they seem on the up and up. Right. I'll tell you what I want. I want this season to be competitive where, it isn't just going to be the same teams over and over, but the same teams over and over, that whole thing where you're like, Pace, well, you're a Tom Brady fan. That's all his career was, but they deserve it. Right. So like, it would be great to see some new teams in the Super Bowl this year, selfishly speaking. But if it's the Niners and the Chiefs, well, guess what? They deserve to be there. From a betting standpoint, we just talked about bias. Futures, there's value on futures. There's been some futures called at In Play Live, a whole series of them for college football, for NFL, not necessarily Super Bowl winners, but futures create remarkable bias, right? I like to head into every game completely fresh and clean. And for me, what that means is the Lions of last year do not exist. The Lions of last week do not exist. They do not exist. There's only the Lions right now. The Lions from the first half of the game do not exist. There's only the second half Lions right now. That is all I care about when it comes to football. It's hugely profitable for me, and I'm going to continue with that.
Yeah, and I think people are out there, but we saw them do this last week. How can we not take that into account?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of spreads have a lot of value for pregame sharps that recognize those patterns, and that can be a team getting absolutely shit kicked, week one, and then they come out in week two and everyone's against them. And a lot of sharp bettors will be on that big spread. They'll think that there'll be potentially 2 to even 4 points of value on that spread heading into week two. So that exists, and you're just interviewing the wrong guy for it all, as many of our listeners probably know.
No, I was going to say, a lot of people know that, and that's actually why I brought it up, because it's a great opportunity though to just remind yourselves, because these are the betting storylines out there. This is kind of what's making headlines of people out there that aren't a part of our community, but like to tune into us. Chances are that they consume a lot of other betting news, and these are the storylines they're seeing out there. And it's kind of like, it's a great opportunity to just remind people, like, hey, sit back and watch the game and actually see what happens, week to week, right? Because there is so much of this information out there. And when it comes to the NFL specifically, it is like information overload. And the NFL too is also one for narratives, storylines. We hear about the NFL script writers. These are all sorts of things that'll come up throughout the season, and there'll be big time narratives that'll all be sort of that'll try to drive the people out there in one direction. And I just think it's important to kind of always look at these things with a bit of more than a grain of salt, but to just sort of sit back and say, hey, you know what? Let's just watch the game and see what happens.
Well, I think the betting public, you just brought up a really good point, right? The script thing is a narrative that supports someone else being in control of their wagers.
Mm-hmm.
So that narrative helps sports gamblers that lose money over the course of time to pass the blame for what happened off as if they should have won or it should have gone a different way. And we all sort of can be like, oh my God, we should have won that one. That stuff happens. I get that. But when you blame something else as if it's controlled in a manner that is the reason for why something happened to you, you are looking at life through a very challenging lens. And I think that the first step to overcoming that is completely taking all of that out of the equation. Really good example, Sean McVay kicking that field goal last year down 10.
Yeah.
I think it was against San Francisco too. I think they were plus 7.5. They were down 10 and he kicked it with zeros on the clock. People thought that was to cover the spread, and they think it was rigged and this, that, the other, right?
Yeah. And there was the time Mahomes went down last season too, right?
Yeah.
Have
you in that game, if you are someone that said those things, have you considered the other side of that narrative? Have you considered the counter argument? Have you considered a different perspective that is not that one? And if you approach things that way, you might have actually hit the plus 7.5 and not pregame, but live, right? And there's reasons and motivations behind exactly why Sean McVay did that are completely separate from the spread, And what a lot of people fail to realize in that spot is the clock was running. Had the kicker have gotten out in there 5 seconds earlier, so they were a little slow, 5 seconds earlier, they would have had a chance for an onside kick without the time running and a Hail Mary to tie or win the game. Sean McVay knew that in the drive, and he tried to get into range to kick as quickly as possible, and he would have done it on first down. He needed it to happen about 8 seconds sooner to have a chance to win the game. It didn't happen that way, and by the time the kick was up in the air, the clock expired, and it was rendered pointless. But if you had that approach, all of a sudden you go, holy shit, maybe this wasn't rigged. Maybe it wasn't to cover the spread. Now, we know, Shane, we've talked about this. There is some manipulation that exists out there. But if you take out the blaming others for your losses, another really good example of this was Todd Gurley when he went down with the Rams against the Packers. Mm-hmm. He went down and fell on the ball after a first down, which created kneel outs. And the whole internet went nuts because he would have covered the spread had he have ran in. And people were saying it was rigged because he didn't. But if you knew anything about football, you knew that if he ran it in, even if there are just a handful of seconds on the clock, theoretically speaking, there could be a kickback touchdown, an onside kick, and a Hail Mary, and they end up losing that game. In fact, that stuff has happened before. Yeah. So when you go down and you kneel out, you eliminated your opponent's ability to win the game. You completely. So Todd Gurley in that moment made one of the best plays he could have possibly done as a teammate and as a high IQ football player. He didn't do it because of a spread.
Yeah, I think a lot of bettors out there too, especially recreational sports bettors, and even just the general public often think, oh well, how can more points not be a good thing for that team? Well, you just sort of explained it. And I think a lot of people maybe don't run through all those scenarios in their heads. And that's part of the development of going from, being an average rec sports bettor, to actually taking it very serious. And then you do start to understand and sort of see all the possible scenarios in which a bet can win or lose. And, you start to sort of understand that, oh no, this team is would be right to go down in this particular scenario and not score the touchdown. And all of those sort of analytics become so much more clear, I think, over time, because I think, the general public out there is always going to think, yeah, more points for team A has to be good for team A. Not always the case. And it's a great reminder there. Okay. Let's talk about one other point I wanted to make too about everything you touched on there in terms of bias, actually, before we get to the next thing. One of the things I absolutely love about In Play Live is that the bets that we're making live are actually based off of very specific strategies. And I think that those strategies eliminate bias completely because it becomes very much focused around the parameters of the wager being placed and not so much while personnel obviously matters and the teams will matter. It's all based on data and probabilities and that sort of stuff. And so when you start looking at things in that lens and you sort of look at your betting in terms of deploying a strategy in a specific scenario, it makes it very easy to let go of all the bias and to just trust the data.
And when you have data like that, Shane, I think that's powerful because right now, take the CFL as an example, right? So we're talking about real football in this episode, and I just brought up CFL.
I was going to bring them up in a little bit, but anyway.
we have a really good sample size of data from this last season, right? Yeah. And it's like our ROI for the wagers that we've called on our stream is 17.3%. That means for every $100 that you bet, you made $17. So if you take the approach of, okay, they're making a call, it's one of the strategies that has made us money all summer long, I'm placing $100 on this, and whether I win or lose, I have just made $17. And when you look at stuff like that, you go, geez, I can't wait to scale. I can't wait for that $1,000 bet where it's $170 that I just made. I can't wait for that $10,000 bet where it's $1,700 that I just made. That bet loses, right? Well, you go, no, I still just made $17. And people don't understand that.
It's
Right.
it's a hard concept to understand, especially in the moment when you've lost it. But over time, you do start to recognize it and you see it, and it becomes very, very real. And 17% is a great is excellent. But some of our NFL strats are even better than that. Pace. I was going back and looking at some of the data from last season and thinking like, holy crap, this was 25%, this was 30%. Like,
Yeah.
licking my chops at the season ahead.
But that I mean, when you have that information, it's extremely powerful. And one of the
Yeah.
fundamental differences between, college football and NFL and CFL is now we have that volume. So when you look at a 17% click where you're like, okay, $1,000 click, I'm making $170 here, and you lose that 1,000, that next opportunity might not be till tomorrow. It might not be till next week.
Yeah.
Whereas with the NFL, it's probably going to be in the next few minutes. And if it's Sunday Night Football, it might be tomorrow on Monday. And if it doesn't come through on Monday and the opportunity doesn't present itself on Thursday, there's a whole whack of them coming the next Sunday. Yeah. Now, take that approach with college, right?
The volume is insane.
Where you go, okay, $1,000 click coming in, I'm going to make $170 every time I click if I'm doing the right thing. Oh, I missed that one. Oh, got it. Missed that one. Right. The volume is freaking mental to the point where, quite honestly, I think it's the busiest slate of the year, week 1 at the 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern slate, where I kind of looked at the menu and went like, I don't even want to do this right now. Like, not like I want to be there. I'm having fun, but I'm like, I don't want to look through all these games. Like, can you just like make it 5 so I can actually process this information right now? Right. And I guess what I'm getting at is like the volume is just ridiculous where, if you do know what you're doing, I can be a crutch for you where I'm like, oh shit, I better go look at that game. But you might be looking at something that I'm not even looking at because of the volume that's going on. The NFL seems to be that sweet spot where it's like, it's this high volume box of, hey, here are the games. This is when they are. They're all coming in right now. It's busy. And then the day slows down. You can start to chill a little bit more and then enjoy Sunday Night Football. It's just a great flow of things, and there's a reason we do so well. And it's just a great game. It's just a great time of year.
Look, I want to bring up something though, because when we're talking about our strategies here, we do have something that we got to get to that is going to potentially impact what we're doing and actually, influence our live betting.
Oh, are we really going to talk about the kickoff?
Well, don't we have to? I think we got to talk about it a little bit, don't we?
We haven't talked about it on this podcast.
I don't think we have. I know that at the retreat we absolutely talked about it. I had a great conversation with the Goose about it, and some of our members were able to chime in. But I think for the mass audiences out there, this might be something that they haven't talked about too much or heard about too much. And I do want to get into it at least a little bit here because it has the potential to influence things. But before we get into it, Pace, do you want to explain the rule very quickly? And then I can no. Okay. So they are now kicking team is everybody's lining up on the 40-yard line. Receiving team, everybody's lining up on the 20-yard line or the 30-yard line.
Shane, every broadcast on every freaking channel of preseason and every game Sunday is going to explain the kickoff.
They are going to explain
Let's talk about what matters from a betting standpoint.
Okay. Well, here's let me talk about that then a little bit. Here's how it played out in the preseason.
That's important.
The average starting field position, improved by just over 3 yards. Okay. Scoring was lower than the books believed it would be, with 31 out of 48 games going under. This is in line with past years. So preseason touchbacks last year, or sorry, not last season. Last season was 73%, not preseason. The whole season, touchbacks, there were 73%. Over the course of the past 5 seasons, 63% resulted in touchbacks. In the preseason this year, only 26.9% resulted in touchbacks. So we are going to see a lot less touchbacks or fewer touchbacks. At least that's what the league was hoping for, and that's how it's playing out in the preseason. And we're seeing teams starting with an average of 3 yards better field position.
Right. Okay. So say what you want about the kickoff, right? If you date back from the NFL, where you look at the Super Bowl and the NFC and AFC championship, it's something like the last, I don't know what the number was. It's crazy. The last however many kickoffs were touchbacks. It's a crazy statistic. It's like the last like 20 or something like that were touchbacks. Now, the progression of the kickoff was you're kicking the ball off, the receiver comes in, and it's causing injuries. So they move the kick further, and then all of a sudden everyone is kicking touchbacks, and then they go, okay, let's start the touchback at the 25-yard line instead of the 20 to encourage people to kick off, to return the ball. To not return the ball for safety issues on one side, and on the other side, try to kick it in like this sort of sweet spot where people will have to return it, right? Well, it didn't work. And we're already seeing Sean McVay basically go, we're taking the 30-yard line all season long. So he goes, if the average kick, like you just said, 3 yards, they're projecting 4 yards for the season. So if the average kick touchback was the 25 before from a touchback, we're taking those 5 yards. We don't care. We'll let them start at the 30. We're going to kick touchbacks every single time. Okay. Who cares? Okay. There are more kicks being returned now. That was the goal. That's what we're seeing, regardless of if the numbers from preseason transfer over to regular season. That's what we're going to see. What matters is betting, especially on this show. So from a betting standpoint, it is significant because totals are adjusted. So if you take the average scoring from last season, which was historically low, if you take the average totals of week 1, which things weren't historically low, you take all the projections, and people way smarter than me looking at all this kind of stuff, they're looking at 2.5 points on average that games are handicapped higher right now. But the actual reality that they're projecting is that games will be approximately 2 points higher. So that speaks to where you say, in preseason, that more games went under than were projected. Now, the reason for this is because whenever you have hype surrounding a team or news or whatever the case, people are like, oh, there's going to be so much more scoring. Square bettors bet the over. Well, just because the hype is saying there's going to be more scoring and the actual data proves that there's going to be more scoring, that doesn't mean there's value on the over. The value on the over has been inflated, right? If you take week 17 or 18 of the NFL last season, and I know it's not apples to apples, and you look at the game totals and then go look at the week 1 lines for this week, they are so much higher. We had totals in the high 20s, low 30s, tons of totals in the 30s last year, every single week by midseason, every single week, because of how bad some teams were and how low scoring some games were. We had like a 6-0 game last year. It's one of the best games I didn't play live, right? I call it what the public hates and we love. Yeah. So from a betting standpoint, there could be more value on the under this season than last season, even though we're projecting to see more points, right? So that's how you have to think as a sports bettor. So I'm really excited for the kickoff because of the hype that it's created with more potential scoring. Am I going to get burned on some kickoffs this year? Yes. I'm going to get burned on some kickoffs this year, but it's a part of it.
I like that you referenced McVay, though, because I think you are going to have some coaches coming out saying, here's what we're going to do. And you can talk a lot about coach speak and whether or not they're being truthful sometimes and what they're saying. I tend to say to believe, though, when a coach says something that they typically mean it. And it's nice to know, right? It's great to know what a coach's motivations are going to be and what their plan of attack is when it comes to a new rule like that. It just makes it takes away one less variable because hey, so-and-so is going to kick the touchback here, or at least that's what we think is going to happen.
Yeah, there's some things I don't like. I don't like that you have to declare for onside. I don't like that you can't just randomly do it. I hate that. I think that that's like an element of stupidity and excitement in football that comes up now and then that's pretty cool to see. But again, from a betting standpoint, like when people bet pregame and live for that matter, key numbers are really important. We may see, I don't want to say like a massive difference in key numbers, but we may see a slight reduction in value of key numbers and relating to the kickoff. And the reason for that is because you're going to see teams where the penalty cannot, this is a big rule, the penalty can't be enforced on the kickoff now. So where you would see this penalty will be enforced on the kickoff, what you'll see is they'll accept it now and go for 2. So they'll the 2-point try will be half the distance instead of enforcing it on the kickoff. and some coaches may be more likely to go for 2 as a result of that. That can factor into totals and key numbers in a way that might be a little bit frustrating to some sharp bettors, where they go, gosh, I thought 7 was one of those key valuable numbers that I look for. And we're seeing less games land on 7 this season, or we're seeing less games land on 3 this season because of that. So that's just something to keep an eye on. The other one, which again is affecting the average field position, is that how often do you see a big kick return? Usually they're punts, but if we do see a big kick return where it wasn't a touchback in previous years, where the ball gets run out of the end zone and it flies down the field, and what's the first thing that comes out of everyone's mouth? Flag, right? It gets brought back, and the starting field position is at the 10, right, or the 5, because of that flag. We can still have those flags on the new kickoff rule. They're just far less likely to occur with the formation of the players being in two lines, like a offensive and defensive line. They're far less likely to happen. So that affects the starting field position. But again, that's factored into the projected 29. But where that is hugely significant is, let's just say it's 4th and goal from the 1. If it's the first quarter, like let's say you're up 7, it's 4th and goal from the 1, and there are 3 minutes left in the game. If you're a coach, you would be insanely stupid to go for that 4th down. You kick the field goal and go up 2 scores, literally 100% of the time. Now, if that same scenario is in the first quarter, the analytics are going to say to go for it. We're already seeing that year in, year out for like the last 5 years. The progression of teams going for it on 4th down has increased significantly across the league. Think about Doug Peterson in the Philly special in the Super Bowl. Plays like that and people are, of course, because they scored, they say the coach is brilliant, but then they show the analytics and they're like, okay, separately of them making it, it was the right decision for them to do that. Now, at the 1, that's a no-brainer. At the 2, it's probably a no-brainer. At the 3, we're starting to get a little Dan Campbell-y now, where we go, should he not? Should they kick? Should they not? Harbaugh's kicking. Harbaugh's going to kick that, and some coaches might, some coaches will go. Well, this is the thing. When you fail on the 4th down conversion from the 3, the 4, the 5, there is a analytical argument that it made more sense to go even though you failed, because instead of trading to the 3 to the 20 or the 25, you're now trading the 3 to the 29.
Yeah.
So that's where we may see more teams be aggressive on 4th and short, but longer than 1 or 2 this season. So does that lead to higher scoring? Yes or no? I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it
that's
really
something
depends
to
on,
really keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it'll depend on that specific team and their conversion rate, right? So you start thinking about teams that can convert on that on a consistent basis versus teams that maybe can't or shouldn't even try to do it. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
And it's also worth noting with that argument, if it's 4th and 3 from the 13, is that different than 4th and 3 at goal? Yes, big time. If it's 4th and 3 from the 29, is that different? Yes, big time. It's at goal specifically that we're going to see it more, knowing that your opponent gets the ball on the 29 if you kick the field goal, right? So if you kick the field goal, your opponent's going to go to the 29. If you don't kick the field goal, you might get a touchdown. If you don't get the touchdown, they're at the 3.
They're
right.
pinned.
That's the spot. That's
and
kind of,
you're playing that field position game at that point, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting and something for us to kind of keep an eye on and watch and sort of very team specific, I think, as well. And we'll have to pull out our notepads along the way and be like, who did what, and then mark it down. Anything else on the NFL that you want to get into? I was going to bring up possible MVPs and rookies of the year, and I know you probably are like, I don't know, who knows, right? But I can rhyme off a few of these things for everybody out there that wants to pay attention to this stuff. But to be honest, I won't be placing any wagers on this, or very unlikely to. But Mahomes being the favorite for MVP this year, 5.75 are his current odds. CJ Stroud coming in at second at 9.0, Josh Allen at at 10.0. Other notables, Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts are in the mix. And if you really wanted to get, spicy on some of this stuff and go outside of a quarterback to win the MVP, which is super,
God.
yeah, right. But I think you could probably imagine the names here, Pace. Chances are
McCaffrey, Hill.
yeah, exactly, right. That's who they are. You're drafting them at the top of your fantasy drafts. Christian McCaffrey coming in the 20th spot in terms of odds rankings. He'll pay 61-1 on DraftKings at the moment, and Tyreek Hill coming in the 23rd spot at 100.
What about a quarterback that you think could get it done that's in those odds range?
What do I think about?
That could be a bit of a shocker.
A bit of a shocker, I think, is Jared Goff on the Lions. Pace. I'm kind of I'm also sort of high on the Lions in the sense that this is a team that's really turned it around over the last 5 years. You've got to love their offense in terms of for fantasy drafting and just that the talent that they have in those weapons. And yeah, Jared Goff is the kind of name that, people kind of maybe scoff at a little bit, like, or Jared Goff, like that guy can ball. I don't know. Right. But no, he can. And when he has the weapons around him, he really can. And I think he's paying something like 23.0 or something like that, over 20-1 right now. So that might be somebody who's sort of outside some of the top QBs.
And what do the Lions pay to win the Super Bowl?
Oh, where were they? I had it in my notes here. Hold on.
You said they were one of the favorites, and they had the greatest handle.
They're up there. They're not the biggest favorite. So it goes Chiefs, Ravens, or Chiefs, 49ers, Ravens. Then it's the Lions. The Lions are paying 13.0. 13.0.
Okay,
yeah.
Guys. So here's a great takeaway from Bet Bash for anyone betting this future shit. And again, this is just a bit of a value look in or a value approach to this stuff. So it's don't bet this, bet that. And the whole concept is finding the market that might not be as popular as where all the handle went, that's still proving the same theory. So, and in some cases is more probable than the wager that pays less. Now, this may not be the best example. What was Goff's payout on MVP?
I think it's sitting at 23-1, depending on books.
So nearly double the Super Bowl odds. If the Lions are a Super Bowl favorite come playoff time. If.
I see where you're going.
Is he in the MVP conversation? That's the question you have to ask yourself. So this is where you could go, don't bet them to win the Super Bowl. Don't bet them to win the NFC East. Don't bet them to win their division. Well, some of these aren't the best examples. But maybe look at some of those Goff props that could be much bigger payouts that could win if he doesn't win the Super Bowl, that would still prove your theory true. So a really interesting approach to that is, maybe you're looking at Caleb Williams for Rookie of the Year. Maybe you think there's value there for whatever reason. Well, what other lines can you look at that that pay quite a bit more that could be just as likely to hit? And one of the examples from Bet Bash was actually looking at Heisman winners and then looking at that same player to go first overall in the NFL draft, right? So Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, two examples of guys that were Heisman favorites, kept finishing kind of in the runner-up or kept, sort of thing, that end up going first overall. Maybe not the best examples of high payouts, but where they actually lost the Heisman and went first overall. And then the other side of that is guys that won the Heisman that weren't projected to be first overall picks in the NFL when they won the Heisman that went first overall. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, right? So what I'm getting at there is winning the Heisman and being on the display in the big tournaments and things like that actually led their draft capital to be way higher than what their combine or skill sets actually indicated. Like Baker Mayfield, there was talks of like second round, late first round. Kyler Murray, mid first round, late first round, both went first overall, right? So don't bet this, bet that is a good approach to futures where you go, I want to take the Lions to win the Super Bowl. Great. Okay. Well, we've just shown you on the show that they have the largest handle and they're the favorite of the public to win. There's how many teams are in the NFL, Shane? 32 teams?
Yeah. Yeah,
are we guessing, or is that I don't even know.
There's 32 teams.
Okay, there's 32. Okay, we're not guessing. We actually know there's 32 teams, right? So if 10% of the public are on one team, right, that implies there's only 10 teams. right? And the odds at 12-1, obviously the Lions should pay less than, some of the other teams, like Shane's jerseys rocking the Vikings.
Geez. Yeah, I know.
Right? Like, obviously the Lions should pay less than the Vikings, but if every team paid the same, you'd be looking at odds at 32-1 with no vig, right? So don't bet this, bet that. Look at some of those other markets that maybe pay more, that are correlated to the success of your team, and may have more ways to win.
Yeah, I love that one. That's a great point there, and I think the Lions example really helps drive that point home, because exactly that, right? If the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl, there's a very high chance that Jared Goff is the MVP.
Well, he's in the conversation.
Exactly, right?
He's in the conversation, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's a high chance that if they win the Super Bowl that he wins the MVP. We just know that he's got to be on the list.
Exactly, right? He's going to move up those rankings in a significant way, where maybe if you do bet a future, geez, you could just go ahead and cash out on it at a profit later on. That's also an approach. Okay. Pace, I know you want to talk a little bit about college football, and I know we touched on college football a little bit already, but week 1 of the college football season in the books. It was extremely high volume over the weekend. There's the slates were massive. But what are you looking for in college football that maybe other people aren't sort of thinking about, or other sort of sports bettors out there, maybe aren't thinking about, especially with all of the hype around the NFL?
Yeah. College football, I just had felt like I dialed the clock back a little bit. Had just such a great weekend. Betting on college football, and just a lot of fun. And with college football versus the NFL, you have to understand that while the rules are close to the same, they're not the same. You are betting on a completely different sport. It's just not the same sport. It's completely and totally different. It's different in ways that don't make sense. I'll give you a really good example of this. Washington Huskies on Saturday were playing Weber State. So I've brought up the Huskies twice now. The end of the game, okay, Washington's up. I don't know what the score is. 35-3. It's 35-3. That's exactly what the score is. They're up 35-3. They've got their backup quarterback in, who is like some 5-star recruit. Apparently he's the fastest player on the team. So he's going to be a really exciting guy to watch next season, if he's still a Husky, wherever he ends up. He's going to be a really exciting guy to watch. They can kneel out. Steve Belichick is over there on the sideline. So if you think about Bill Belichick and the way he, how conservative he would be at the end of an NFL game. The other guy over on the sideline there is Pete Carroll's son, right? There is 50 seconds left in the game. They hand the ball off for a running play instead of kneeling out up 35-3. They hurry to the line. They run another running play. Now the clock can run out. They do not need to kneel. So the clock is running. They do not need to run another play.
Completely. Yeah.
They hurry to the line, and with 4 seconds left on the clock, they take a knee in victory formation to show that they kneeled out. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because they only needed to run 2 plays. They both could have been kneel plays, but we watched almost every single college football coach this last weekend do something similar with the lead. We saw Rutgers at goal with the ability to be respectful and kneel out and score a touchdown. The list goes on and on, because I could just run through the menu and go, these are what the coaches did at the end of the games. So people ripped to shit Mario Cristobal because he didn't kneel out last year and ended up losing a game because he didn't kneel out. And it wasn't the first time he had done it. Yet, across the league, it is common practice to not do this. Watching the end of the Michigan game, 3 run plays, one after the other. They couldn't have lost the game. They're up too much. But coaches aren't kneeling out and being respectful. They're trying to score late, even if it is just busting a run through the line. What are they teaching those players, and why? This is like cramming a dunk. You're up 30 in a basketball game. The shot clock can dribble out. Everyone's walking off the court and cramming a dunk in someone's face.
Yeah.
And what have we seen in the NBA when that happens? Massive fights break out.
I was going to say big time fights can happen, and but we have seen it, and we do see it every once in a while.
Yeah. So like culturally, college football is fucked up when it comes to what coaches are doing at the end of games. analytically, separately of the culture of it, it makes zero sense and has next to no upside with only downside. Potential injuries from players, potential loss of game, potential loss of job from decisions that you made, and yet it's not one person. It's across the league. So when you talk about it being the same rules, more or less, from one sport to the next, what's going on is completely different. So from a betting standpoint, you have to look at that and you have to either completely abandon things, you have to adapt to the way the game's being played, and you have to know who is doing what from the standpoint of how they handle different scenarios. Some of those coaches would kneel out in a one-score game, but because it wasn't, they didn't. So when you have this angle of something that cannot be handicapped because of how fucking insane and random it is, there are opportunities from a betting standpoint. And yeah, we cleaned up, had a lot of fun doing it. I think week one is really special. I made a social media post before week one saying, some of the changes to the rules in college football this season. The first helmet comms are now in play. So coaches have 15 seconds to talk to their players in between plays.
Right.
The second, it's not a 2-minute warning. It's called the 2-minute timeout. So that's just a factor in the grand scheme of the game. They've added that 2-minute timeout. So the clock stops at 2 minutes for both halves. And then the third one, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it was in that social post. But I basically said with the helmet comms, don't be surprised if teams look a little rusty or sketchy. Houston was one of the best offenses in college football last year. They scored 0 points, 0 on Saturday. Florida State has lost their first 2 games against bad teams where they were massive favorites against them. And this was the team that was undefeated last year, supposed to go to the Natty, all the controversy around them. They are fucking awful. But the thing is that when it comes to an inability to handicap entirely new players, entirely new, systems and things like that, teams from different divisions colliding that have never played each other in potentially years and years, which obviously is completely new players now, it's very, very difficult. And week one, but definitely the first few weeks of college football, and we saw that with FSU 2 weeks in a row because they're one of the only teams that's played 2 games. There is huge value on these inadequately handicapped games where you don't just forget about who the favorite was pregame. You flip on FSU last night because we're recording this on a Tuesday, and you're like, they're not the better of the 2 teams. And then Boston College money line with them up 14 was still plus money.
It was amazing to watch that quarterback that we were kind of ragging on DJU because, Pace, I think you come on the stream and you sort of start dropping the hints like, hey, this guy's pretty bad. He's actually really bad. And it's like, oh, is he? I don't know. I don't watch these guys. I don't know this team. I'm not paying much. I'm only watching it now because I might bet on it. And then to actually watch him come out and play as bad as he did and to consistently do it over and over again. And then to think to myself, wow, these guys were the pregame favorites with that guy running the offense. It's like, how can you not start looking at the other side here?
Yeah. And the thing is with nil deals is he was a big deal to go into the portal and get picked up by FSU. And now you have to question whether he plays anymore. The guy's done. He was there was a Jacob Eason for the Washington Huskies was a similar story. 5-star recruit, number 1 recruit out of high school, everyone doing everything they can possibly do to get their hands on this guy. And he just comes out and every time he plays, you think he may have gotten worse. And I feel like DJ from Clemson to Oregon State to FSU is one of those stories. But honestly, man, Shane, college football, between the volume and narrowing down volume. So whatever it is that you're looking for, we've talked about this quite a bit in the last few episodes, proving a theory. Well, find the game that fits your theory.
Yeah.
You might have 100 games in a day. Just don't panic. Don't go betting. Find a game that's fitting a mold for you. That could be an underdog that's playing well against a favorite. It could be that simple. And go, okay, how am I going to make money from this game now? Narrow it in and then execute. And I thought we did a great job of that on Saturday. Definitely didn't win every bet that we placed. But just week 0, week 1 in general, we did a tremendous job. We're off to the races with college football, and really excited for the rest of the season.
That's awesome. It's great to see. For someone like me, it's hard to commit to a whole Saturday. So for everybody out there who doesn't quite follow college football, it's a full day Saturday. It's 14 hours. I think Pace is how long
we did 14 and a half on Saturday.
That's nuts. It's insane, and it's hard for a lot of people out there to commit to that much time. But it's actually really a nice sort of compliment if you want to pop in and sort of drop in when you can or around key slates or around key games, especially if you know the strategies. So this is for people who are within the In Play Live community. If you've watched the masterclass, you understand the strategies, you've seen them maybe deployed a little bit in the past, you can really sort of just pick your spots throughout a day if you want to get a little college football action and get in there and just, hop on and deploy the strategies with the team and just, let the pros sort of help you dial in onto which games are worth focusing on. And it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well said. And I think also it's worth noting why we do a long day like that. So like you might not be able to be on the whole day, but I was on the whole day, and I will be for most or all Saturdays. And it's where passion intersects with fun. I love watching college football. If I wasn't betting on the games, I'd probably be watching quite a few of them. It's exciting. It's entertaining. So, if you love sports and you love football, you're probably doing that to an extent already. And then where the passion interjects and where you put structure around that passion is where you can hopefully profit. And I look back on Saturday and had a multi 5-figure day from a financial standpoint. So, those things can interject where it becomes productive, where you go, geez, I really don't want to miss a Saturday because it is successful.
Yeah. Okay. On that note of passion, do we still have room in our hearts for the CFL? Now that yes. Now that the NFL's here, college football's here, we've talked about the CFL, 17% ROI over the course of the season. Do we still have time and room for the CFL?
Yes.
And that we do. We still got love for it.
Let's put it this way. Most of the games that overlap with college or the NFL, most, not all, are on at a time where there isn't, say, 9 or 10 NFL games on. Saturday's tough. There's tons of college football games on when the CFL's on.
Yeah, that's actually tough. I want to mention that, actually. It's very tough for the books. The books aren't keeping up with CFL when college football is on.
They might not even have the game.
They might not even offer the game. They might only offer the line for a very short amount of time and then remove it completely. So that's something, if you are interested in betting on the CFL, just know that it might be harder to find now that real football's back.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. All right. Well, looking forward to, but you're right. The times, they tend to be, Thursday night where there's only an NFL game on, or Friday night. And there's, the volume isn't so high, but in those high volume times, it can be different.
Yeah. It could be Sunday night football. You got CFL on too. It could be a nice compliment.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's a lot of fun. Well, Pace, I'm very much looking forward to riding with you throughout another NFL season, another football season. It's very exciting times. And hey, we'll do a little fantasy football as well. A payment coming your way shortly in USD, not in CAD. All right.
There you go.
All right. To you and everybody else out there, sports bettors around the world, till next week, keep eating those books. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join In Play Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.